March 14th, 1941. The radar station at RAF Kenley sits in darkness, its cathode ray tube glowing green in the cramped operations room. WAF Corporal Margaret Hayes watches a faint blip appear at the edge of her screen, then vanish. She marks it as atmospheric interference, standard procedure for weak, intermittent contacts. She does not scramble fighters. Within 90 minutes, her decision will accidentally save 300 sleeping civilians, derail a meticulously planned Luftwaffe operation, and expose a catastrophic flaw in German night bombing doctrine that no one on either side yet understands. But first, we need to understand why that blip appeared at all, and why misreading it mattered more than getting it right. By March 1941, Britain's air defense system is dying of success. The Blitz has entered its 7th month. Luftwaffe bombers cross the channel nightly. RAF Fighter Command scrambles interceptors to meet them. The statistics appear manageable. Roughly 12% of German bombers are turned back or destroyed each month. Civilian casualties, while tragic, remain within projected tolerance. The system, on paper, is holding. But the paper lies. Fighter Command is bleeding pilots faster than training schools can replace them. Night fighter crews fly until they collapse from exhaustion. Radar operators work 18-hour shifts, staring at screens until their eyes burn. The Luftwaffe loses bombers, but Germany has bombers to lose. Britain is running out of the one resource no factory can build: rested, sharp-eyed human beings capable of making split-second decisions in the dark. Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding calculates that at current attrition rates, Fighter Command will cease to function as a coherent force by late summer. The mathematics are brutal and simple. Britain can win every night and still lose the war. RAF doctrine for night interception in early 1941 rests on a beautifully logical foundation. Ground-based radar detects incoming raids. Controllers vector night fighters toward the bomber stream. Pilots close to visual range using airborne radar or searchlight illumination, then engage. The system worked brilliantly during the daylight Battle of Britain. At night, it works just well enough to be retained. The Air Ministry's position is clear. Radar-directed interception represents the cutting edge of military technology. Modifications are incremental: better sets, more stations, refined procedures. The fundamental architecture is sound. Proposals to alter the basic approach are politely noted and filed. The institution has committed to a path, and the path has delivered survival. No one with authority is interested in revolution when evolution appears sufficient. This confidence rests on a hidden assumption: that the Luftwaffe will continue flying the same routes, at the same altitudes, with the same predictability. It is an assumption the Germans are about to abandon. Luftwaffe Kampfgeschwader 55, based in occupied France, receives new orders in early March 1941. Previous raids followed predictable corridors: up the Thames estuary, along the coast, toward London's docks. British radar and searchlight belts have learned these routes. Interception rates are climbing. The new directive is simple: vary approach paths, use weather as cover, fly lower when possible, and employ feint raids to exhaust defenders before the main strike. The Germans do not announce this shift. They simply begin flying it. On the night of March 14th, KG-55 plans a raid on the Vickers-Armstrong factory in Weybridge, southwest of London. The route is unorthodox: a low approach over the Channel, landfall near Selsey Bill, then a sharp turn north, avoiding the dense radar coverage around Portsmouth and Southampton. Timing is critical. A small feint raid will approach from the east, drawing fighters. The main force will slip through the gap. It is elegant, and it should work. It fails because of a flaw no one on either side has yet identified. The Luftwaffe's new doctrine makes their bombers invisible to the system designed to stop them, but also makes them invisible to the system designed to ignore them. Corporal Hayes has been on duty for 11 hours when the contact appears. It is faint, intermittent, and located in a sector where raids rarely approach. Standard procedure, drilled into every operator, is clear. Strong, sustained contacts are hostile aircraft. Weak, flickering contacts are weather, equipment noise, or seabirds. Scrambling fighters on false alarms wastes fuel, exhausts pilots, and erodes credibility. Hayes marks the contact as interference and continues scanning. She is following orders. She is doing her job correctly. The Blip she dismisses is the lead pathfinder aircraft of KG-55's main strike force, flying at 1,200 feet to stay under the optimal detection range of chain-home radar. The aircraft is real, hostile, and carrying incendiaries to mark the Vickers factory for the bombers. Behind it, Hayes's decision not to scramble fighters is, by doctrine, correct. It is also about to accidentally save the mission from succeeding. The German Pathfinder crew believes they are invisible. They are partially correct. Hayes has dismissed them as noise. But they have made a fatal assumption, that flying low will keep them hidden all the way to the target. They do not account for the terrain. As they cross the Sussex coast and turn north, they climb to clear the South Downs. For 90 seconds, they rise into the optimal detection envelope of the Truly Hill radar station. This station, unlike Kenley, is manned by a newly trained operator, Flight Sergeant Peter Hollis, on his third operational shift. Hollis sees a strong, sustained contact moving north at 184 Getwarentform. He reports it immediately. The sector controller, weighing the report, makes a judgment. One aircraft, unusual route, but definite and strong. He scrambles 2 bow fighters from Tangmere. The Pathfinder crew, unaware they have been detected, continues north. They are 12 minutes from the target. The bow fighters are 18 minutes from intercept. The mathematics are tight, but they favor the defenders. Barely. The Pathfinder's mission is to drop incendiaries on the Vickers factory at precisely 03:45 hours, creating a visible aiming point for the main bomber force arriving 5 minutes later. If the Pathfinder is early, the fires may be extinguished. If late, the bombers will have no mark and must abort or guess. Timing is everything. At 03:38, the Pathfinder crew spots the Vickers factory and begins their run. At 03:39, the bow fighters, guided by running commentary from Truly Hill, acquire the Pathfinder visually. At 03:41, the lead bow fighter opens fire. Cannon shells tear through the Pathfinder's port wing. The aircraft does not explode. It staggers, drops incendiaries wildly across open fields 2 miles south of the target, and crashes in flames near Cobham. The main bomber force, approaching from the south, sees fires, but in the wrong location. Some crews, trusting the Pathfinder, bomb the fields. Others, suspicious, search for the factory and waste time. A few drop bombs randomly and turn for home. The raid, meticulously planned, disintegrates into confusion. 14 bombers jettison loads over empty countryside. 3 are intercepted by fighters scrambled in response to the Pathfinder's destruction. The Vickers factory is untouched. Weybridge sleeps through the night, unaware of the devastation that nearly fell. Neither side immediately understands what happened. The Luftwaffe's post-mission report blames navigation error and bad luck. RAF Fighter Command credits alert radar operators and effective scrambling procedures. Both explanations are incomplete. The true lesson is buried in the details. The Germans' new low-altitude approach made them harder to detect, but also made them dependent on precise navigation and timing. A single interception of the Pathfinder collapsed the entire operation. The British, meanwhile, succeeded not because their system worked as designed, but because it failed in a useful way. Hayes's dismissal of the initial contact meant no premature scramble, no exhausted fighters returning to base when the real threat appeared. Hollis's detection of the Pathfinder during its climb was accidental, a consequence of terrain the Germans had not fully scouted. The victory was real, but unrepeatable unless someone recognized the pattern. Flight Lieutenant Reginald Jones, Scientific Intelligence Officer at the Air Ministry, reads the after-action reports from March 14th with growing interest. Jones is not a pilot or a radar operator. He is a physicist tasked with understanding German technology and tactics. He notices something others miss. The Luftwaffe is changing behavior. Raid routes are less predictable. Approach altitudes are dropping. Feint attacks are increasing. The Germans are adapting, and the RAF's doctrine is not. Jones begins collecting data. He pulls reports from dozens of raids, mapping approach paths, altitudes, and radar detection ranges. A pattern emerges. German bombers flying below 2,000 feet are detected inconsistently, sometimes clearly, sometimes not at all, depending on terrain, radar station, and operator judgment. The current doctrine treats weak contacts as noise to be ignored. But if the Germans are intentionally flying low, weak contacts may be the only warning before a raid arrives. Jones writes a memo proposing a doctrinal shift. Treat weak, intermittent contacts in unusual sectors as potential threats requiring investigation, not dismissal. He submits it through channels. It is acknowledged, filed, and ignored. The Air Ministry's position is understandable. Fighter command is already stretched to breaking. Scrambling fighters on every weak radar contact would mean dozens of false alarms nightly, wasting fuel and exhausting crews even faster. The current system, while imperfect, maintains a sustainable operational tempo. Jones's proposal would replace measured attrition with chaos. The memo is politely declined. Jones, lacking operational authority, cannot force the issue. But he does not stop. He begins quietly briefing radar operators and sector controllers during station visits, explaining the German tactical shift and suggesting they use discretion when evaluating weak contacts in unusual locations. Some listen. Most continue following standard procedure. The doctrine remains unchanged. Then, on April 16, 1941, the Luftwaffe bombs Belfast. Belfast, far from the usual target zones, has minimal radar coverage and few night fighters. The Luftwaffe approaches low over the Irish Sea, avoiding detection until the last moment. The raid is devastating. 900 dead, 2,500 injured, the Harland and Wolf shipyards heavily damaged. RAF Fighter Command scrambles no interceptors. The first warning comes from ground observers hearing engines overhead. The failure is absolute and undeniable. In the aftermath, Jones's memo is retrieved from the files and reconsidered. The Air Ministry issues a quiet directive. Radar operators are authorized to report weak contacts in unusual sectors for evaluation. Sector controllers are encouraged to use judgment in scrambling fighters, balancing the risk of false alarms against the risk of missed raids. It is not a formal doctrinal change. It is permission to improvise. The institution has not admitted error, but it has opened a crack. Over the following months, the improvisation becomes routine. Operators learn to distinguish between atmospheric noise and low-altitude aircraft by watching how contacts move and persist. Controllers develop rules of thumb. Weak contacts moving steadily at bomber speeds warrant investigation. Flickering contacts that vanish and reappear randomly do not. The Luftwaffe, unaware of the shift, continues flying low-altitude approaches. Interception rates climb. By May 1941, the Blitz is effectively over, not because the Germans stop bombing, but because losses and the demands of the Eastern Front pull resources away. The RAF's adaptation, born from one misread blip and one analyst's persistence, has bought time. The system did not win through flawless execution. It won by failing usefully, recognizing the failure, and adapting faster than the enemy expected. Historians estimate that the doctrinal adjustments prompted by the March 14th raid and Jones's subsequent advocacy prevented between 15 and 20 successful Luftwaffe raids in April and May 1941. Assuming average casualties per raid, this translates to roughly 2,000 civilian lives saved. Corporal Hayes never knew her dismissed blip mattered. She continued operating radar until 1943, then transferred to training duties. Flight Sergeant Hollis, whose detection of the climbing Pathfinder broke the Weybridge raid, was killed in a traffic accident in 1944. Reginald Jones survived the war, received quiet recognition within intelligence circles, and spent decades afterward writing about the scientific war. His memoir mentions the radar doctrine shift in a single paragraph. The Vickers factory at Weybridge, untouched on March 14th, produced Wellington bombers until 1945. The story of the misread blip is not about heroism or brilliance. It is about systems under pressure, the gap between doctrine and reality, and the unglamorous work of noticing when the two diverge. Hayes followed procedure and accidentally preserved the force needed to stop the real threat. Hollis followed procedure and caught the enemy at the one moment they were visible. Jones recognized a pattern no one else prioritized and pushed until someone listened. The RAF's night defense did not succeed because it was perfect. It succeeded because it was flexible enough to learn from accidents, humble enough to revise doctrine mid-crisis, and lucky enough that the enemy's adaptation created new vulnerabilities as fast as it exploited old ones. Wars are not won by flawless plans. They are won by the side that notices its mistakes first and fixes them fastest. Sometimes the difference between catastrophe and survival is a single blip on a screen, and whether the person watching it has the judgment to wonder if the noise might be signal. If you found this story worth your time, hit like and subscribe, because the archives are full of nights where the wrong decision, or the right one, hung on details this small, and we're not done digging.